Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of this video is The Problem of Evil, Part 2. I just made one a few minutes ago, a little while ago, called The Problem of Evil, and it was a rather lengthy video. It was the longest one I've made so far. It was 28 minutes and several seconds long. And I didn't feel like I could keep going on any longer in that one particular video, so I stopped. But there's another important feature about the problem of evil that needs to be discussed. And so I don't usually do part 2 videos, but in this case, I thought it was warranted. So we're going to do the problem of evil part 2. Now, if you haven't watched that video yet, you need to go watch it, because what I'm going to say in this video won't make an awful lot of sense if you don't have the background from watching the first video that's just called The Problem of Evil. So if you have watched it already, then we're going to kind of pick up where we left off. We ended talking about perspective, that depending upon your perspective, something may seem like a terrible, horrible, evil, some pain and suffering connected with something that's just, awful, beyond imagination. And that just, that sort of thing, God just shouldn't let happen. So God ought to stop. Well, from our limited human point of view, there could be an awful lot of suffering of different kinds that we might put in that category, as saying, well, this is just horrible, this is ugly, and it's evil, and God shouldn't allow that sort of thing to happen. Well, we talked about several reasons why God does allow those things to happen, and I'm not going to repeat all those in this video. You should watch that one if you haven't already. But one thing there that I did not talk about, and this is primarily the reason why I'm making the follow-up video part 2, is that one of the biggest sources of evil in the world is human free will. Okay, now this is a difficult subject, and I've touched on it in other contexts, not necessarily in relationship to the problem of evil, but just as the kind of beings that humans are. We are self-determined beings. We're created in the image of God, so we're fundamentally mental beings. We are minds. We are rational. We are highly aware, and we are self-determined, among other things. The list goes on. It's much longer than those 3 things, but those are 3 of the absolute fundamental things that are involved in being created in God's image. And so free will, or self-determination, the idea that I determine my own life. There's no such thing as fate. There's no cosmic power out there that's determining how my life is going to go and what is and isn't going to happen and all that kind of stuff. I make my own decisions, and some of the decisions I make are good, and some of the decisions I make are bad, foolish, hurtful to myself or to others, and an awful lot of the evil in the world, an awful lot of the pain and suffering that exists in the world exists because of human free will, human self-determination. Okay, that's why so much of the pain and suffering exists. So let's think about some examples along those lines. In the other video, I happened to mention a man who was doing his internship in pediatrics at the UCLA Medical Center, and he was an atheist because of all the suffering that he sees infants and very young children having to endure. And he wonders, if there's a good, all-powerful God, why would he let children suffer that way? And part of the answer to that And I gave part of it in the other video, but the part that I'm going to answer in this video is because of human free will. Many babies are born, let's say, addicted to heroin or something like that. Well, why would God allow that? Well, because the mother was a heroin addict, and she was using heroin, and she addicted her baby. Okay? Now, she had free will. She was a self-determined person, and she made a very, very, very bad choice that not only was bad for her, but that was really bad for her baby and caused her baby an enormous amount of pain and suffering. God didn't do that. And nature didn't do that in the sense of, it's not like a tornado or an earthquake or something like that, a natural phenomenon. This was a choice that a woman made and got pregnant and continued to use the drug and addicted her baby. Okay, so how is God supposed to stop that? How is he supposed to intervene in that process of she takes drugs, they get into her bloodstream, therefore they get into the baby's bloodstream, and the baby becomes addicted to those drugs? How's God going to stop that? Well, God is God. He can work miracles. He could do anything. He could intervene and keep that baby from getting addicted to the drugs that his mother's using. Well, yes, technically he could do that, but that's not the way he designed the world to work. The world works on the basis of natural laws, and he set up the world to operate in a certain way. Gravity works. Okay, now we know how to build planes and fly planes, and if you've got a plane that's at 35,000 feet and suddenly its engines stop working for some reason, a mechanical failure, then gravity is going to pull that plane down to the ground. And a lot of people are probably going to die. And there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering associated with that. Well, why didn't God suspend gravity and gently bring the plane to earth? Well, again, we talked about this last time. Part of the way God designed the world was with the possibility of pain and suffering and challenges that have to be overcome. And that's part of what makes us strong and resilient. Part of what helps us grow and mature and figure things out. Okay? So God created the world one way. He doesn't then turn around and start intervening all over the place to stop certain kinds of things from happening because someone might suffer as a result of that. Pain and suffering are part of what God has decided in his wisdom to allow in this world, because that helps us grow and mature and get strong and tough and resilient. Okay? But that's especially the case, especially true when things happen because of human free will, because of the choices that humans make. And God doesn't intervene in that. And from one point of view, you need to understand that God can't intervene in that. When he decided to make humans in his image, and that includes being free to decide, having free will, being self-determined, then that is part of the definition of a human being self-determined. Okay? Now, God can't go in there and simply take away on this occasion and that occasion and another occasion and another occasion and just start taking away pieces of things that humans get to decide, to where, if you want to decide what kind of salad dressing you want on your salad at dinner, you can decide that. Sure, go ahead. But if it's a decision where someone might suffer, then no, you don't get to decide that. Well, see, it doesn't work that way. Either human beings are self-determined or they aren't. And if God created people in his image, and that means they're self-determined, then they have free will. Okay? And he can't go in and take away their free will all of the time, or even some of the time, and still have a human being left when he's finished. Okay? Because there are some things that God can't do. Now, that statement annoys a lot of people, and it's problematic for a lot of people because they think, well, God can do anything. God is God. No, he can't either. He can't either. God cannot make a round square. God can't make a square triangle. See, God can't make a married bachelor. There are some things that God can't do because those things are not subject to power. Okay? Now, think about this. A square is an object with four sides of equal length. That's what a square is. Okay? An object with four sides of equal length. Now, does God have the power to go in and take away one of those sides? Of course he does. Sure he does. But if he does, what does he have left? Well, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's no longer a square. You see? Because by definition, a square has four sides of equal length. And if God comes along and takes away one of the sides, then what he has left isn't a square. You see? The same way with a triangle. See, a triangle, three sides, okay? If he takes away one of those, then he doesn't have a triangle. If he adds another side, a different, then it's not a triangle. Okay? If he makes a circle, and then he takes out part of the circle, then he hasn't got a circle anymore. Okay? There are some things that by definition, God cannot do anything different. This is what it is. A square, a circle, a triangle, a bachelor. Okay? As soon as a bachelor gets married, he's not a bachelor anymore. By definition, see, a bachelor is a man who's old enough to be married, but who's not married. God cannot make a married bachelor. That's an oxymoron. It's a contradiction. Not even God can do that. Okay? So, if a human, by definition, has free will, if he or she is self-determined, God can't go in there and just say, oh, I'm going to take away this free will decision. I'm going to take away this decision. You can't decide that. Because as soon as he starts doing that, what he's got left is not a human being. It's just an automaton carrying out some sort of programming. You see? You see the problem here? If humans are free to decide, then they're free to decide. What if they decide to do bad, hurtful, ugly, mean things? Well, then they're free to do that. Yeah, but then people suffer. Yes, they do. Not God's fault. Okay? Can't blame God because people use their free will badly, and then people hurt and suffer because of that. And so much of what goes on in the world, in the way of suffering, is the result of somewhere along the way, somebody made some bad choices, and now look what happened. Okay? Again, now I don't mean to upset people, but let's just think about AIDS. AIDS did not exist in the human population for a long time. It didn't exist. It existed in the primate population. You know how it got into the human population? People in Africa eating monkeys. And when they killed a monkey, and they don't bleed their food very well. Even today, I mean, I used to live in a small village in Nigeria, West Africa. And even today, when they slaughter a goat or a lamb or whatever, they don't bleed it very well. Like we do here in America, we bleed our animals really well. They leave a lot of the blood in there, and then they don't cook it thoroughly enough. And when you eat that meat, if there's bacteria and viruses or whatever in the blood, and you eat it, then you contract those diseases. Okay, eating the meat of primates that weren't bled properly and cooked properly is how the disease got transmitted to the human population. And then people in sexual relations transmitted that disease to other people. And in some cases, they were having sex that God says, yeah, but you probably shouldn't be having that kind of sex. Don't be doing that. But they did it anyway. And so for a long, long time, it became pretty much an epidemic kind of a problem. Okay, well, we've got drugs now, and we're trying to learn to deal with it, and there aren't nearly as many people dying from AIDS as there were a couple of decades ago, because we figured out how to solve that problem. But human free will, people doing what they wanted to do, is what created that particular problem in the human population. Lots of people don't know that, but that's how that happened. Okay? There are all sorts of different things that people do that cause human suffering. Okay? And that's not God's fault. That's their fault. Okay? And other people suffer because of it. Yeah, they do. And if some good can come from it, then that's what we're looking for. Some lesson to be learned, some growth and development to be had, something that helps someone grow, then that justifies the pain and the suffering, because some greater good resulted from it. Now, someone may say, well, yeah, but that's not the only source of suffering. There's plenty of suffering in the world that doesn't come from human free will. Well, that's true. There is plenty of that. There's there are earthquakes, and there are floods, and there are hurricanes and tornadoes, and there are just all kinds of natural disasters, fires, and lightning strikes, sets a forest afire. And I mean, there are all sorts of things that happen, tidal waves, that it wasn't because of a choice that a human being made. It was the natural phenomenon, the world doing what the world does. And God doesn't specifically cause those things. Nobody causes them. They just happen. When a tornado hits down and it's spinning and it's moving from here to there, whatever, okay, God isn't guiding and directing that tornado from this house to that house to that house, and then it goes back up and it moves, and then it comes back down and it goes away. God's not guiding that tornado. When a river overflows its borders and floods, He's not deciding specifically where that water is going to go and which houses are going to get flooded and that sort of thing. God doesn't do that sort of thing. Natural disasters happen naturally, not supernaturally. That's why they're called a natural disaster, not a supernatural disaster, right? Some people try to call them an act of God. Insurance companies do that. They call it an act of God. It isn't an act of God. God isn't causing those things, and He's not determining and directing those things. Those things just happen, and people suffer as a result. That's true. They do, and I've already dealt with that in the other video, so I'm not going to go over it again. But the point here is that a great deal of the suffering that goes on in the world goes on because of human free will. People decide to do things that cause other people to suffer. Not God's fault. And He can't stop them, because if He did, they would no longer be human beings, because being self-determined is part of being a human being. God can't take away their free will and still have a human being left when He's done, any more than He can take away one side of a square and still have a square left when He's done. Well, those are my thoughts for this video. I needed to add that in and do a part 2 video so that we covered the subject of the problem of evil more thoroughly than I was able to do just in the one video. So I hope you found this helpful. And as always, I would encourage you, read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.